Doug Pederson makes his return to Lincoln Financial Field, this time not to see a statue unveiled, but potentially his last stand as the coach of the Jags. All that and more on this Crossover Thursday.
You are Locked On NFL Crossover, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Welcome on in, our everydayers, to another special Crossover Thursday edition here on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team each and every day. I'm your host, Gino Camilleri of the Locked On Eagles podcast, and joined by the literal GOAT himself, host of Locked On Jags, the barber, Tony Wiggins. But before we dive into this episode is brought to you by our friends over at Prize Picks. Crossover Thursday is presented by Prize Picks. Download the app and use code LOCKEDONNFL to win $50 instantly when you play $5. So, Wig, I think we know what the big story is. What's going down in Jacksonville right now? A former Eagles head coach. It seems like 2020 has made its way into 2024 down there in Jacksonville for the Jags.
All right, so I'm going to put this in barber terms, right? So everybody can try to understand this a little bit. I want you to substitute gender because I don't want people to think that I'm picking on women. So if you're a woman, you can just say that I'm talking about men. And if you're a man and you want to think that, you know, you can think whatever you think. All right, there's somebody's talking about you. All right, here you go. You ever seen somebody and they broke up with somebody and you go, damn, you couldn't make it work with that? You ain't try everything? And the guy says, nah. You say, man, if you don't mind, I'm going to take a stab at, you know, you mess around and go to dinner and get married and have a baby. And that dude comes to see his kid on visitation. And all of a sudden he comes to the door. You're like, hey, what's up? You're like, man, boy, you should have told me that this is what we was getting into. Oh, so now you don't understand. Now you realize why a guy got fired after he won one Super Bowl within 2 years or 3 years. Oh, so now you want to realize that everything ain't as pretty as you think it is from the outside. There's a reason. When I told you no, I couldn't make it work, what do you think I meant? Do you think it meant something that was easy? Or do you think it's something that's hard? And I think that's where we are right now with Doug Pederson. And what makes it hard is he's a really good guy. Doug Pederson is a gem of a human being, I think. There's some people I know that might disagree with that, but he's a good guy. He comes from great pedigree. He talks the game the way you want to hear it talked about. He's a player's coach. But this is the second stop where this is looked this way, where they're so disjointed that from a week in and week out basis, you don't really know what to expect, and you're going to get the same answers. They don't know how to transfer practice to how they play. And each and every week they find a different way to lose. So other than that, I don't know what to tell you about what's going on about when we're coming back to Philly. The Jaguars are just 2-6, and now we might be in the same situation that Philly was and moving on to a new coach.
It really hurts to hear that, Wig, because I think the sentiment around Philadelphia is the exact same thing. He's not a guy that's ever going to get booed when he steps foot into Lincoln Financial Field. What he did for this organization, it'll never be replicated. But you're right, man. Like, it's like trying a food and then you bite into it and it's that one bad taste where you're like, I hope I never get that bite again. And it looks like Jacksonville, they grabbed that same sandwich that the Eagles had, got that same bad bite, and now it's just spreading to the rest of the organization. Walk us into behind the scenes, what's going on in the front office. It looks like some pieces are being moved out of Jacksonville. Are they in true sellers mode to keep this thing going with Trevor Lawrence moving forward? Or is it, we got to get this down to bare bones and start from scratch once again?
I don't think that's what they're doing. I still think Trent Baalke, the GM's trying to save his job by making what appears to be astute moves at the trade deadline. I can understand why he didn't do this earlier, moving on from Cam Robinson, who he sent yesterday to Minnesota for a conditional 2026 fifth round pick, which is like a bag of open animal crackers already, right? And I understand why you don't trade your offensive line depth. Philly had a dude, that guard. I think what's the kid's name? Mulatala, whoever the kid is that's in Pittsburgh right now.
Oh, you're talking about Isaac Seumalo, right?
Isaac Seumalo. He got hurt and then he got replaced, but they kept him. You know what I'm saying? Philly had 6-7 offensive linemen. I remember when Landon Dickerson didn't start. Yep. And when you're going to make a run, you don't just give up parts, especially parts that are on a rookie deal. Cam Robinson isn't, but Walker Little is. You just don't move on from it if you think you're going to make a run because you feel like you're going to need those guys. Well, when you get to the trade deadline and you're 2-6 and your receiving core is banged up and it kind of looks like y'all are lost a little bit, while you're not giving up on the season, you still have an obligation to do what is fiscally responsible and what is correct. Cam Robinson didn't start last year. I heard he pouted last week. I heard he pouted. Walker Little actually played pretty decently. And they said, you know what? Let's just go ahead and move him and save whatever cash we're going to save on his salary for this season and get something for him. Now, I know the logic says that you wait for the compensatory pick if he's signed in free agency. But if somebody's belly aching and pouting, man, you want to get them on out of here. But I would pout too if I'm the starting left tackle and you just take me out of the game and don't tell me why. So I would probably be a little bit upset too. But I don't think that they're in a wholesale trim it down to nothing but bare minimum. I do believe that they're looking at it like, okay, who ain't going to be here next year? And the guy making those decisions, Trent Baalke, probably ain't going to be here next year. And if he is, he's still got to do his job. You know, it's just like anybody else that might be replaced at the end of the year. Well, a guarantee where you're going to get replaced is to not do your job for the rest of the season. So I think he's just doing his job every single day, the normal way that he would do it, with sort of an eye towards saving a few dollars and moving on from guys that aren't having a huge impact on his team.
So let's look at last offseason. He brings in a whole lot of talent the last couple years at the wide receiver position. Let's take a step to Sunday. Who's even going to suit up at the wide receiver position for this team? Because you said it, they are banged up through and through. And people in Philly are laughing about this because this was Doug Pederson in 2020 where they did not have, or 2019 rather, Carson Wentz throws for 4,000 yards. Not a single wide receiver goes for over 500 yards. So it's almost like history is repeating itself for Doug.
Well, they do have a really, really good player, Brian Thomas Jr., the rookie. I think he leads all rookies in yards and probably touchdowns right now. And then the eyeball test, he's just you can just tell. Yep. You can tell, barring injury, that kid is going to be one of the 6 or 7 best receivers in this league in a year. And he might be knocking on it at the beginning of next season. Christian Kirk's out with a broken collarbone. I'm pretty sure, I'm not certain, he probably played his last game as a Jaguar. Gabe Davis, who they signed in the offseason, like you just said, they probably wish they wouldn't have signed him. He's banged up too, and he wasn't offering a whole bunch. He had some drops, caught a couple of touchdowns, but they were in games that were out of reach, and then he had a couple of drops in critical points. That's probably a regret. They're not getting the return on Eric Armstead that they thought they were getting either. So when you look at it from that perspective, yeah, they did a lot of stuff in free agency, but none of it's really sticking right now. Ronald Darby, y'all are familiar with him. Mm-hmm. Darby hasn't played well, and I argue with people that was a good signing. It's probably my Florida State love wanting it to be a good signing, but he hasn't played particularly well. And it's just, for me, is a lot of misses going on. There's a lot of misses on not only guys that you drafted, guys that you should have drafted that you didn't because you picked other people. Second round pick Mason Smith, a mid second round pick, has been a healthy scratch in a lot of games. That doesn't bode well for a team that has a lot of things missing. So a lot going on that's wrong around here, and a lot of people to blame. Doug Pederson is not the only one. In fact, I would blame Trent Baalke before I blamed anybody.
All right, it is a lot of doom and gloom in Jacksonville, but let's end it on a positive note, because in Philadelphia, we have a couple edge rushers of our own that it took a little longer to get going. Tell us about what's going on with Travon Walker right now. It seems like he's putting it together, and he is one of the positive bright spots for the Jags.
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought that up, because it's like he's going to have a family reunion in Philadelphia with all those other Georgia players that are on the team, right? Yep. When he was in college, people said he was the best player on the team. Mm-hmm. And then they said an underclassman named Jalen Carter was the other best player on the team. I'm not so sure those people were lying, because those are the two guys right now that look like world beaters. Travon Walker has 16 and a half sacks in 25 games, in his last 25 games.
Pretty good.
That is pretty damn good. Even if your name isn't Aiden Hutchinson, he is not a bust. He's a violent player in the run game. You know, he kind of reminds me of, and people don't do this often, where usually they say, well, a white guy reminds me of a white guy, right?
Mm.
No, Travon reminds me of Chris Long, but bigger.
Ooh, okay. Philly fans love Chris Long.
But bigger. Like, he does a lot of things that doesn't really show up on tape. Might not be as twitchy, but he plays with pure power, man, and he is just something to behold. It's going to be interesting to see how he does against that really, really good offensive line. But he does a lot of things that coaches rave about that don't show up in the stats.
And you set it up perfect, Wig. Probably the biggest storyline in Philadelphia is that offensive line a little banged up once again, and we'll get into the Eagles portion of this discussion coming back here on Crossover Thursday. Crossover Thursday is brought to you by 5 Hour Energy, and our friends over at 5 Hour Energy know that being a passionate football fan isn't just a hobby, it's a way of life. It takes a lot of energy to power through all-day tailgates, touchdown celebrations, or an agonizing overtime, which is why they've created Stand the Fan 5 Hour Energy Shot with special flavor called Fan Fuel, the energy shot made for super fans just like you, the fans who are first in the parking lot and who are the last to leave. We see you. So if you're excited for Doug Pederson's return to Lincoln Financial Field this Sunday, make sure you go and grab yourself some FanDuel so you can be juiced up for this 4-quarter extravaganza. And 5 Hour Energy knows that no matter what team you root for, being a fan requires heart, soul, and a whole lot of energy. Whether you're prepping for a big tailgate or ironing your jersey, your game day to-do list is always miles long. That's why the limited edition Stand the Fan 5 Hour Energy Shot is here to keep you fueled throughout the season. What's your fan fuel this week? Whatever it is, do it with a 5 Hour Energy. Available on 5hourenergy.com and shipped nationwide. All right, everyone. Thank you to our everydayers for joining us here on Crossover Thursday. Locked On Eagles, Locked On Jags. I'm your host, the Locked On Eagles, Gino Camilleri, joined by the barber, Tony Wiggins. And we were just talking about the potential matchup between the good young rushers for the Jacksonville Jaguars going to go up against the Philadelphia Eagles offensive line, who, Wig, I'm so glad you brought up earlier in the conversation about how important depth is on the offensive line, because the situation right now, the Eagles are out. They're starting left tackle Jordan Mailata. They've had to move Fred Johnson. They got the Johnson and Johnson brothers on each side from the right tackle, where he played some snaps for Lane Johnson, to left tackle. And then second-year player Tyler Steen has filled in for Mekhi Becton, who has been out for a couple weeks with a concussion. But the thing about it is, they haven't missed a freaking beat on that offensive line. Last week against Trey Hendrickson, one of the most underrated edge rushers in the league, Fred Johnson allows 1 pressure on the day. So if I'm looking at matchups, I'm looking at Travon Walker against Fred Johnson. When those two get lined up, and I've said this on the last couple crossovers here, Wig, Fred Johnson's the tallest guy on the team. He's a guy that if you stay compact, play with leverage, and you get underneath his pads, sounds like something Travon Walker is pretty good in doing, you could get to the quarterback. So that dynamic of, one, how does that Jags defensive line get to Jalen Hurts? How is that counteracted, though, by maybe the second biggest story in Kellen Moore, who all of a sudden has turned into a brilliant play caller? Moved Jalen Hurts off platform a bit, got him under center a bunch, started getting Saquon Barkley downhill. From the outside looking in, Wig, what are you looking at as the one way the Eagles cannot beat this Jags team?
Well, the one way that they can't beat the Jags team is to get really, really conservative. And Green Bay made that mistake last week. And I text Peter Bukowski right from the press box. I said, this is a mistake. They got the ball, and it's like 8 minutes left. They're up by 10. They're trying to run the clock out. They go 3 and out. They punt. And I said, this is a mistake. Because one thing about the Jaguars, they're gritty. And you know that. They won a whole bunch of games down the stretch. They were down 27-0 in the playoffs to the Chargers. And in a lot of games this year, they made it very, very interesting. You can't play sit and duck with them. because they're talented, they just disjointed. So what happened is the Jaguars kicked the field goal, and then here they go again, doing the obligatory, let's run the clock, make the Jaguars use their timeout. They got the ball back in 2 minutes, went and scored a touchdown, tied the game up. You just can't, don't get ahead and think that it's sweet, because it's not. They are, and the last thing I hit Bukowski up, I said, what I tell you. And what I had told him the previous week was, you're going to watch them play. And this was the healthy version of them now, with Christian Kirk and everybody else and Evan Ingram. You're going to watch them play and go, how in the hell have they only won 2 games? And they took Green Bay right down to the wire last week. This is what they do. So they can't be super conservative. I will tell you this, one advantage they do have, even with those backup linemen, our defensive coordinator, Ryan Nielsen, feels the need, like every 3 plays, like hockey substitutions, to run guys in and out on the defensive line. I'm talking about on the first drive of the game, right? And then if the Eagles get the ball and they go 3 and out, on the second possession, you're going to see a bunch of backups in there.
No kidding.
Whether it's 3 and out, whether it's an 8-play drop, it does not matter. You will see the backups early in the game. And then what happens is the Eagles will move the ball down the field. They'll get to the red zone, and then you'll see Travon Walker and Josh Allen going back in the game like Captain Saver, trying to prevent them from scoring a touchdown. I understand he's explained why he does it. He's done it at every stop he's had. It's ridiculous, though. And I just want you to pay attention that when the Eagles do something, watch who's on the defensive line and who's not. And it's going to blow your mind that their 2 best players are over there on the sideline. So the Eagles are going to have those opportunities. They're also going to have this opportunity. Anytime the Jaguars play a running quarterback, and a lot of defensive coordinators do this, you gap and hold, man. You don't run past that dude's armpits, because you're going to give him a lane to get out, right? Well, they do it, and they do it like it's almost to a track. They did it to Deshaun Watson, who ain't been running nothing. And Deshaun Watson was able to sit back in the pocket and throw these little dink and dunk short passes, and it kept the Jaguars on the field on 3rd down. To me, all Philly has to do is be patient and let Jacksonville self-destruct, because that's what they've been doing all year defensively anyway.
And I think that's maybe music to our ears in Philadelphia. Maybe some people are on edge, because that's I would say the one thing with Jalen Hurts. Last game, he holds the ball for nearly 3 seconds, but he's perfect. The first 4 games of the season, when he held the ball for more than 3 seconds, that's where all the turnovers came. But I will say the one thing that I would be worried about if I am a Jags fan, Jalen Hurts has never looked more explosive than he has in the last couple weeks. Lou and I on our show, we were saying, did this guy lose maybe a step and a half? Like, he's not beating, interior guys to the edge. And then all of a sudden, he turned on the switch, and he's college Jalen Hurts once again. And that's what got this thing going. But I want to talk about 2 rookies in particular. One, you talked about Brian Thomas. Is there a chance he's actually playing this week?
Yeah, there's a chance he's going to play. And the dude you're about to mention, it was the dude that I want. Brian Thomas Jr. was my pick for them, and the next guy was my pick too. I know you're going to talk about. You're talking about Q.
Talking about Q, man.
Yeah, and man, he was the other kid. I said if they take. Now I heard they were going to take Terry Arnold if the Dolphins or somebody had taken
over Quinyon Mitchell.
Yeah, and see that.
Wow.
And I like Terry Arnold. He's a local kid too. Quinyon Mitchell is something else, though, man.
He's a dog, man. I'm glad you said that, because we did our NFC squad show the other night, and Peter Bukowski is trying to say that he's the second best defensive back in the division, trying to throw Andrew Phillips in. No. If you've watched Quinyon Mitchell, he is going against some of the top competition, and he is balled out. And I think everybody, if you have no affiliation with the Jags, with the Eagles, anytime Quinyon Mitchell is lined up on the side of Brian Thomas Jr., boy, get your popcorn out, get out whatever alcoholic beverage you like, because that is going to be the show to watch. I'm just glad that we might get mad at our GMs from time to time, but they drafted some talent this year. I think they both hit it out of the park with Brian Thomas Jr., Quinyon Mitchell, and even Cooper DeJean saved the day for the Eagles last week against Jamar Chase. Feels good to have some good ball players in your back pocket for a little bit.
It does. It does feel good. And it feels good that to a certain degree, that the coaches know what to do with that talent. I know Sirianni has his stuff going on. I think in Jacksonville, as mad as people can get at Doug Pederson, I got to keep saying this. I saw Bill Belichick and Tom Brady. I saw Belichick hold Sean McVay to 3 points in the Super Bowl. You don't just score 41 by accident.
Nope.
Maybe a broke clock is right twice a day or whatever it is, like whatever they say. But to me, I give more blame to Trent than Doug. If you told me I had to get rid of one of them, I'd get rid of Trent Baalke. I think in Philadelphia, it's a no-brainer who they get rid of. They get rid of Sirianni before they get rid of the GM up there, Howie Roseman. They don't do that. So it's a little bit of the same situation where it's like a disconnect, it feels like, between the GM and the coach. But we're more sympathetic for the coach, and that's not really. They're not really that sympathetic. But if you had to pick one, they'll be more sympathetic towards the coach than the GM, and I think it's the reverse up in Philly.
I think you hit it right on the head, and unfortunately, Doug had Howie Roseman in the building, and he was going nowhere because Howie Roseman has been here for nearly 20 years, so it was a tough out. Leaving Philadelphia, Lou and I keep saying we don't want this to be Doug's last stand. We don't want it to be his Alamo, but we're going to get into the predictions, and maybe it's a little closer game than people are expecting. So hang around as we finish up this edition of Crossover Thursday. This Crossover Thursday edition of LOE and Locked On Jags is brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Get ready to tackle all the NFL action because right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get the hunch in the middle of a game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. This episode is also brought to you by our friends over at Bilt Rewards. Listen up, renters. Ever feel like you're stuck in this loop of rent payments, just watching your money vanish into thin air? Well, it's time to turn that rent game around and start earning some serious rewards. That's where Bilt Rewards comes in. Bilt is breaking ground as a neighborhood rewards program that hooks you up with points on your rent. Every month, pay your rent and watch the Bilt points roll in. Use points to jet off on a dream vacation. Put your points towards a flight or hotel stay with 500 plus airlines and 700,000 plus hotels and properties. And you could also use your points to book a fitness studio class, redeem them towards a future rent payment, and they're designed to meet your lifestyle. Pay rent hassle-free through the Bilt Rewards app. Your rent game just got a major upgrade. Bilt points have been consistently ranked the highest value point currency by the Points Guys and Bankrate. Earn points by paying rent right now when you go to joinbuilt.com/LockedOnNFL. That's joinbuilt.com/LockedOnNFL. Make sure you use our URL so they know that we sent you. Joinbuilt.com/LockedOnNFL to start earning points on your rent payments today. All right, everydayers, welcome on back. Finishing up this Crossover Thursday edition. Locked On Eagles, Locked On Jags, Gino Camilleri, Tony Wiggins, finishing up this edition of the show. Hopefully this isn't the Alamo for Doug Pederson, his last stand. Things haven't been going great in Jacksonville, but they put up a fight last week against the Green Bay Packers, put up a ton of points, and FanDuel right now has the over wig at 45.5. I'm looking at that, even though the Eagles are 7.5 point favorites, and saying, as good as the Eagles defense has been the last 3 weeks, only allowing 2 touchdowns that came in that game against Joe Burrow, I don't think that is going to be what they do the rest of the year. It has to come to a middle ground at some point. And Doug Pederson, with all the emotion, I think they're going to put up a stand against the Birds.
Yeah, they will. I'm a little bit concerned about it because of their injuries, the fact that they're banged up. A healthy Jaguars team, they usually put up a good fight against everybody. That's just kind of the way it is. But they make enough mistakes. They did this a few years ago when they came up to Philadelphia. They'll make enough mistakes, and those mistakes will be huge. Like Trevor Lawrence played well last week. He's played well for 3 weeks in a row. The thing is though, he threw an ill-advised pass early in the game after the Jaguars had got a red zone interception against Jordan Love, he gave it right back to him, and they scored a touchdown. Then late in the game, when they're still in the game, I think at this point it's 20-17. He fumbles the ball inside of his own 5-yard line trying to run, and they went up by 10. Don't care how well you played down the stretch, you take those 2 plays out of the game, it's a whole different ball game. So you're going to see somebody in Trevor Lawrence that you're going to be like, I see why they think he's a franchise quarterback. And then you'll see a few plays where you go, I see why other people don't. But it is the most Jay Cutler type thing you ever want to see in your life. There's a big variance between, like I used to watch, I tell people this story all the time. I used to watch when Green Bay, when Cutler was in Chicago, I used to, him and Aaron Rodgers, I just get my popcorn and watch them throw the ball. There wasn't that much difference. The difference is one guy was careless with the ball and the other guy might have been at that time the dude that never threw interceptions. That's it. So, yeah, Doug Pederson, as far as him getting another shot, coaches usually get 2 franchises, 2 chances. They usually don't get 3. Mm-hmm. And I just think Doug Pederson is going to end up going down that lane where like a Norv Turner went, like great championship caliber coach, but just not the leader that you want for a franchise, especially a team like the Jaguars that are still searching for culture.
It's tough. It's tough to hear because we went through this exact same thing. I think feel like you are doing the shows that we did at Locked On Eagles 4 years ago. That's
the indictment.
Yeah, that you didn't change.
The indictment is, we're 900 miles away from each other, probably a little bit more than that. And we're saying the same things, and it's 4 years removed.
Mm-hmm.
So that means whatever you thought you saw, if y'all thought, okay, I know Philly fans were like, let's see whose fault it was. Was it really his fault or was it Howie Roseman? Like, the Jimmy Johnson and the Jerry Jones situation, 30 years of evidence that told you that they ran the wrong guy out of town, and Jerry should have just kept Jimmy. It wasn't Howie Roseman. It was Doug. It wasn't a combination of them where it didn't work. No, Howie Roseman ain't nothing like Trent Baalke. But this situation looks exactly like that one. And it feels like that. And it hurts me to talk about him like this. But you got to, check your feelings and just keep it real. And I'm keeping it real. I'm sorry that he had to work under Trent Baalke, but Doug Pederson hasn't done what, everyone thought he was going to do. Now, granted, he came in and took a bad situation and they went 9-8 and went to the playoffs. They went 9-8 again last year and they missed the playoffs. They won 8 games. They were 8-3, and then they tanked down the stretch. The year before, they were 2-7 and won a whole bunch of games to get in. It's wild to think that those 2 things could happen in 2 successive years, and we not even look at it and say, wait, this is too big. That's too big of a gap of during one season. Like, they're really bad, and then they're really good, and then they're really good, and then they're really bad. And now this 3rd year has really shown that it's more of the bad than it is the good, and that's a sad situation.
And I think exactly what you just said could be said about Nick Sirianni as well, where it's like the coach, GM, who's going to leave if there's ever a disgruntlement. It's going to be the coach. Like you said, Howie's going nowhere. And the Trent Baalke discussion, that's for a different day. But I will say that the last time the Eagles had a competent head coach and a young GM that they played last week in Joe Burrow and Zach Taylor, as opposed to the 2 they played before that in Deshaun Watson and Daniel Jones, I think they have a better opportunity to maybe push the pace against the Eagles. But I will say the one indictment on Trevor Lawrence, he's going to give this team some opportunities to make plays on the ball.
Yep.
Eagles won the turnover differential big last week against Cincinnati, took the ball away from Joe Burrow, caused a couple fumbles as well. When push comes to shove, Doug Pederson had a little run in his Super Bowl year when they were just running over teams, and we were saying, okay, this is what it is to be a Philadelphia Eagles team. It almost feels like that magic has come back to Philly a little bit the last 3 weeks. That personal element with Doug, though, I don't like the 7.5 points. That's a football line. That's a rat line right there. I think a lot of points will be scored, but I think the Eagles, at the end of the day, they have their one drive that they just burn the clock down. It's 8-9 plays, 7 minutes in the 4th quarter, make it a 2-possession game. Hopefully it's not the last stand for Doug, but That's the last stand for Wig and I until tomorrow. And we appreciate everybody joining us here for Crossover Thursday, brought to you by Prize Picks and making us your first listen each and every day. For your second listen, make sure you go check out Locked On NFL in the morning. You could get a double dose of espresso with the madman, Tyler Rowland, where I am on the Monday shows, or you could join Tony Wiggins in the evening each and every day. But until then, make sure you go subscribe and check out Locked On Jaguars, Locked On Eagles. Wig, appreciate you hopping on. Shout out all the Jags fans. Shout out all the Eagles fans. And shout out Doug Pederson. Best of luck wherever you end up after Jacksonville, my friend.
Yeah, I wish I was coming up there. I could go to Xfinity Live and party like a rock star, but I got to stay down here in this 85-degree weather. How about that?
Oh, yeah. Eagles fans, if you ever run into Wig, he's a great guy. Jags fans, Eagles fans aren't so bad. Just make sure you're a good person at the end of the day. But that'll do it here on Locked On Eagles, Locked On Jags. Until next time, we appreciate you.